say, I will be using the Ultimate today. I know I've used Stencils in the past couple of weeks, and I've shown you how to create backgrounds without using the Ultimate, but I think today the background can actually be achieved using the Ultimate, and without also, say, using some of the techniques that I've made that I've shown you over the past couple of weeks. If you don't have the Ultimate, then to say that really shouldn't hinder you, and you can still go ahead and make the card also. So first off, I'm going to emboss a piece of card. Now, I've cut the card down to the size that I actually want to use. Now, this won't be the full embossing folder size. There it is, I'm just trying to find it there. And you can see here's the embossing folder. I'm making a square card again, as you know, it's probably my favourite card to make. The main piece that's going to be on the card is, I think it's about 14.5 centimetres square, and I wanted this central panel to be embossed with the embossing folder, and I wanted to leave a panel on either side. Now, if I were to use the full width of the embossing folder, it wouldn't leave me too much of the base card on either side. So that's the reason why I cut that down. And I didn't want to use too much sort of matting laying around the outside either. I really wanted the design of the card to sing, really. So that's why I've made this like the full height. I've used washi tape just on the top of the embossing folder, actually, just to mark out the area where I want to emboss this card. And all it does, it just makes sure that I just put the card in straight, and I sort of get the area that I want. What I want to do is really utilise this largest circle, the largest bubble on the folder, because what I want this to do is actually frame the main rosebud on this stem. So as you can see, all I've done is just use the washi tape there just to mark out where I want the card to sit inside. Now you can see also on this card that I've highlighted some of the bubbles here. Now there's one of two ways of doing this. Both ways I would use the smaller the smaller stencil brush, and you can either emboss your piece of cardstock. This is one that I've just done earlier on, and you can take one of your inks. I'm using Lisa's blending inks for this all the way through today. And you can just take a little bit, just blot off the excess ink, and you can just gently sort of stencil around and highlight those bubbles. That would be a nice way of doing it. And that way you can pick out different circles and different colours. Or you can use the letterpress technique, and you can add the ink directly onto the embossing folder, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to add the ink to my embossing folder, and I'm going to pick out those circles. Now this is another reason why I put the washi tape on, because I can see the area that I actually want to add the ink, so I won't sort of be missing the design space. So I'm going to pick up some ink on my brush. I'm using one of these smaller brushes because I really want to have a very small amount of ink, and working onto the side where most of the circles are debossed, I'm just going to add the ink into those circles and just swish that around and just make sure that that's really nicely sort of diffused into the background there, so we have a really light layer. And just be guided by the sort of the outside of the circle there, and that will allow you, just use the outside of the circle there just to give you that really smooth sort of circle motion when you're blending the ink on there. You really don't need to take up too much ink at all. I mean, perhaps some of the smaller circles you can fill them in entirely, but I just quite like the look of going around the outside like that, because that gives us that nice airbrush look. And just pick out the circles and try and imagine what it would look like actually on the card. So I'll just run this through. the way. Now, as we pull that out, not only do we have the amazing 3D embossing there, but we do have those circles or the bubbles highlighted. Now let me just bring that up to the camera just a little bit. Hopefully you can see that the colour has been added there. Again, very subtle, but by the time you start adding your pink for the buds and the rosebuds, that will actually sort of be highlighted from the background, and that I think is really, really pretty. So now what we can do, we can start coming in with our stencils. Now, this particular set, the budding stem set, comes with 3 stencils. So it's one of the sets with less stencils, which makes this process a little bit quicker actually. This isn't a quick card necessarily to do. I mean, it depends on how you want to do it, because as you can see, I've stenciled a lot of rosebuds in the background here. Now, if you just want to do the centre panel, then perfect. If you want to go to town with the rosebuds on the side, it's just really a case of just playing and see what takes your fancy, and say it's a really nice sort of mindful card really to make. It gives you a chance just to sort of sit and relax. Now, with this embossed piece here, I'm not going to stencil on this piece here because this is where the die cut will go. And I just want to stencil on some of these smaller bubbles. Now, at the moment, all I'm going to be doing is focusing on the rosebud. So bring this back in. All I'm focusing on the stencils is this section here, so I can add a little bit of colour. And this is just this small stencil here. This small part of the stencil. So you can see, but because of the nature of the card we're using smaller areas, it means that I can actually use the peg system this time round, and I've still got enough space around that stencil to manipulate my card so I can have the rosebud sort of sitting in different sort of orientations. So what I'm aiming to do is to stencil the rosebud in the centre of the bubbles here that I've actually highlighted with the pink already. So what I can do, I'm using, as I say, Lisa's blending inks this time round, and I'll be using a combination of the Sugar Candy, the Woodland Moss and the Cobblestone, which is a lovely grey, it's a greeny grey sort of colour, but that will just give me the little highlights in the background. Now I have my blending mat just to tap off. Actually, I don't need that because I can use a stencil actually. So I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of ink. I really don't want too much because, as I say, I want the aim for these rosebuds is to just be a little bit fainter than the original card that I made. So when I come to do the die cut, it's that sings and not the embellishments in the back. So I'm just going to blend a small amount of ink through the stencil. Obviously I'm going to leave my cardstock there. We can just secure that down with the magnets. Come in with another stencil brush, just tap off the excess ink and just ink that through. Again, all I'm doing is just concentrating on the rosebud. You can, if you wanted, use this smaller one, that's entirely up to you. And I shall come in with number 3. Now you can either go a slightly darker green, heavier, or just a tiny bit of grey. Say all I want is just this to be so subtle in the background, because this is your backing paper in effect. You can see there just how pretty that looks sitting and highlighted in one of those bubbles. That's just so pretty, I think. And very quick to do because you are only focusing on one part of the stencil. Now, let me see. Now I think what I might want to do is just put a little rosebud in here. But I've already prepared the background for this card because, say, there's a lot of rosebuds to be done and you didn't want to sit and watch me do that. Now, to prepare the background card, you can see I've actually got 2 lines there because there's no point me stenciling in the centre because that's going to be covered over. So all I've done is just put the pencil lines where my embossed panel will be. So I know that I can work on these 2 areas. Now, just looking this on here, I've got half a circle here, which I want to put a rosebud on, but I also want that to go over onto the background card. So I'm just going to line that up, and I'm just going to work with this as being a whole piece. Now, I don't want to stick this together at this stage, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to position that so it is within this small bubble, and also so it goes onto the background here, and I think that just adds a really nice bit of continuity, and hopefully once I've finished you'll see how that all comes together. Now I want to keep those 2 layers together. I can secure those with the magnet there, and I have the stencils secured with the peg system, so we are good to go. It means I can come back in with my pink stencil brush. Now you'll notice I didn't pick any ink up here. There's more than enough ink on that brush already. And as I say, I really do want this just to be faint in the background. So that's stencil number 1. Stencil number 2. Make sure I pick up my green brush and green ink. Before I pick up any ink, I'll just check how much is left on there and just pick up what the remaining ink actually that is still sitting on the stencil. So these have actually become your working palette, which is actually quite handy. So take that away. And you can say, without picking up any more ink, I had more than enough colour on there to stencil this rosebud. And I should come in with stencil number 3. Let's just check if there's enough grey, which I think there is. Again, I just want that to be so subtle. And you can see now how the rosebud spans across the 2 pieces of card. So we have the sort of off the page look on the background here. Now I think I might leave that central panel as it is, and I'll just show you that you can actually stencil on this background, larger background. Although we're using a large piece of card, which you would have thought won't be manoeuvrable enough under that stencil, we are really only working on this panel, and because we want to have the random look of the rosebuds, we can, as you can see, we do have enough space to rotate that piece of card underneath, so we can add some more rosebuds to the background here. And I just wanted to show you that because I know I've created backgrounds in on other lives and I haven't used the peg system, and I'd fully appreciate if you're new to stenciling, that might have been a little bit daunting. You can see just how pretty that background is. And we have our embossed section, which I want to highlight by putting onto some of Lisa's mirror card here, the satin card. So I shall mat and lay that on there. Now this is going to be highlighted just very simply by just 2 pink panels down the side, but put that down the centre, and that is ready to go onto the base of the card. Now this time I'm not actually going to mat and lay around the outside because I just like the simplicity of that. What I will do now is go on and stencil the full rosebud stem for you, the full budding stem. So I've got myself a larger piece of card, and I shall just square that up to the edge of the Ultimate, and I have my stencil on the peg system, and we can go back in. Again, I'm going to pick up the colour that's on there. Now this time I do want the colour to be really vibrant on these images, so I should make sure I have enough. Now I'm going to graduate the colour on this rosebud actually, so I'm going to make that darker at the base of the rosebud. And I'm going for a nice pink today because I thought it was rather apt. A couple of years ago Mum bought me a rose for the garden called a Queen Elizabeth rose, and that's a lovely pink colour. So I thought it was just apt for today. It's just a really nice link, I think. Okay, so we come on to the rose stems. I'm going to come in with the largest brush because I have a larger area to colour. Now initially I'm just going to add just a gentle amount of colour before I start building. She says not put on that far too dark this time round, but never mind. So I'm just going to build up that colour. Now I'm just using one ink. I'm just using the green ink today, and I'm just going to layer it in different intensities so we get a two-tone effect on the leaf. Now I know Dawn has shown you on her lives that you can actually mix your own greens by using green and blue, so that's something that you can experiment using as well, and it gives you the different tones, which is a perfect use of all the inks. But I think just for ease today I'm just going to go with the one green, and I really like this sort of olivey green colour. So that's stencil number 1. Then with stencil number 2, and we have the background stems. So what I'm going to be conscious of is that these are in the background, so these are going to be fainter. I really don't want these to be as bold as that stem that we've just stenciled, which is actually in the forefront of the design. Now it's always worth remembering that although you use the stencils in order, 1, 2, 3 in this particular case, there is nothing stopping you from mixing and matching once you've laid down the initial colour, going back onto all the different layers and just tweaking. You can, obviously you can't take away colour, but you can add more colour and you can make it more intense once you've got a flavour of the colour that you've laid down. Now there's only a certain amount of sort of time that I can sort of play and keep going backwards and forwards, because obviously you don't want to watch that, but this is where the you can really take your time and do all the blending to create sort of real depth with the images of these stencils. Now before I take that away, I'm going to come in with a smaller brush. Actually I should come in with a bit of grey. And what I want to do is just create some shading in these background leaves here, and that will just make them look a bit different to the leaves in the forefront. So just to add some interest, and come in with a bit more green and just come into the tips of the leaves there like that. And you'll notice that I am swapping between the two different types of stencil brushes, so if you do have all the stencil brushes at home, then do make use of them, because they do offer you sort of varying levels of control when you're laying down that ink. So that's stencil number 2, and what you can see is that background stem is slightly paler and these leaves do have a slightly different colour to these ones in the forefront, so it does give oh, that's the wrong stencil, come in with this one, so it does give you a good sense of depth, I think. Now these are smaller details, so I'm using my smaller stencil brush and make sure I come in heavy with that green ink. Now just while I'm on this one here, I just want to add a tiny hint of pink, because that's a rosebud that hasn't blossomed yet, so we just want to give that slight peek into what might be about to bloom just there. So we'll do that, and these details we really want to have sort of quite heavy, because we want those to pop and stand out on the green tone in the background there. So I really like the tone on tone look. I think it makes shading so much simpler. It takes all the guesswork about what sort of colours I should use. If you use tone on tone, you really can't go wrong. And all it means is you go lighter on the first layer that you put down and slightly heavier on the subsequent layers, and you can build up a real good amount of shading that way. So there we are. So there's our rosebud. To die cut that now, I will use a piece of washi tape just to make sure that that stays in place, because of the intricacy of this particular die. We really don't want that to move. So we just stick that down in a couple of places. And that should only take one pass. Just gently take off that washi tape like so, and the die can come away. There, look, I mean that just fell out, didn't it? So I'm using Lisa's super smooth or extra smooth card as well. It die cuts like a dream. And you can see how you can position that rose stem so the bud is within this larger circle, which is what I wanted. Now just one little detail. What I want to do, and I think we'll actually sort of just tidy up this card just a little bit, just again, just sort of for my eye, it's entirely up to you, but I'm actually going to snip into this, and I'm going to take this set of leaves away. So that just really streamlines that bud into that central panel. Now I've done that with the original card also, which has now left me with 2 pieces of leaves. Now I won't throw these away. I will put these back into the folder with the stencils, and I know that they're sitting there and I can use these at a later date. Now all that's left to do is to add a sentiment. I just want to go simple, and I'm using the foiled and plain sticker sentiments here. These are already die cut for you and already pre-printed, and all I want is just something really simple. And I think what I might do is just put that straight onto the card. Oh, as is. I really don't think that needs too much more than that. So we have the second card there, which I think I've achieved the slightly more delicate look in the background than I did with this one, which is a really lovely look, I think, and that really makes the stem sort of pop to the front. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I've given you a few more ideas, and I think sometimes it's nice to see these things sort of in action. It doesn't need to be a really sort of fancy all singing all dancing technique, but you can really make something so effective. But I'll be back with you again next week, next Tuesday. So hope you all have a good weekend. Thanks again for joining me today, and take care everyone.